The wound of being ignored, the psychology of the unseen child. There's a kind of silence that doesn't just surround you, it defines you. It's the silence of not being seen, not being heard, not being known. It seeps into you before you even know what the world is. Before you understand love, you understand love, you understand love. You understand this: I am alone in a room full of people. That's the origin story of the unseen child. Not abused, not necessarily hated, but invisible. And that invisibility becomes a wound so deep, so silent, that even the child can no longer find words for it. This isn't just psychology. This is ontology. This is about being, and what happens when the world refuses to acknowledge it. We're not talking about neglect in the dramatic sense, the kind that makes headlines or court cases. We're talking about the subtle absence of presence, the parent who's always too busy, the teacher who never notices the raised hand, the friends who never ask how you are. And over time, something strange happens. You stop raising your hand. You stop speaking. You stop expecting to be seen. It's not that you believe you don't matter, you don't even think that far. It's like the idea of mattering never really entered your world to begin with, and so you adapt. You learn to survive in absence. What does that do to a child? It creates a split, a fracture in identity. On the outside, you might become excessively helpful, quiet, agreeable. You become what others need you to be, hoping maybe unconsciously that if you're useful enough, someone will finally see you. On the inside, though, you begin to disappear. The real you, the one with messy feelings, loud ideas, contradictory needs, gets buried under layers of performance. You become a ghost in your own life. And the scariest part? The world rewards you for it. You're called mature, polite, easy. But inside, there's a scream that never had permission to exist. This is where the philosophical weight begins. Because being ignored is not just a psychological injury, it's a metaphysical event. When you're not seen, you begin to question whether you exist in the same way other people do. You start to wonder, do I only exist when someone else confirms it? And if no one confirms it, what am I? A shadow, an echo, a placeholder in someone else's story.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more topics you love.
Now imagine growing up like this. You carry that question into every room you enter. You scan people's reactions not for connection, but for proof of reality. You don't ask, do they like me? You ask, do they see me? And when they don't, you don't get angry, not at first. You get quiet. You get small. You get used to it. Because you were always told, subtly or directly, that your presence was too much or not enough. So you learn to disappear as a survival tactic. But the problem is, once you make yourself invisible, how do you ever come back? This is where many people are stuck, even as adults. They've built lives around being unseen. They've chosen roles that keep them in the background. They've attracted relationships that mirror their childhood dynamics. They've taught themselves not to need too much, not to speak too loudly, not to take up space. And they wonder why they feel empty. It's not because they have nothing, it's because they've never been received. They've been performing their entire existence in a theater with no audience. Think about that for a second. What happens to a soul that never gets mirrored? Can it still grow? Can it still thrive? Or does it begin to shrink, to collapse inward, until it becomes a silent orbit around other people's needs? And here's the twist. Many unseen children grow up to become exceptional adults. Empathetic, observant, creative. Why? Because they had to develop inner worlds to survive. They had to become sensitive to subtle cues because no one gave them direct affirmation. They had to create meaning from scraps. And so they often become the artists, the healers, the thinkers, the ones who see what others miss. But even in their brilliance, the question still haunts them. Does anyone see me, or do they only see what I do for them? This is the paradox of the unseen child. They become so good at being what others need, they don't even know what they need. They can read a room instantly, but struggle to read their own heart. They can reflect everyone else's emotions, but when it comes to their own, there's a blank page. And that blankness becomes unbearable. So they fill it with perfectionism, with overachievement, with helping others, with silence. But the wound remains. So how do we heal it? How do we bring the unseen child back into the light? In the next part, we'll explore the hidden survival strategies of the ignored child, why they become overfunctioners, people pleasers, and shapeshifters, and how those very strategies keep them locked in cycles of invisibility even as adults. The chameleon's curse. How the unseen child learns to survive by disappearing when a child is ignored, not harmed, not rejected outright, but simply not seen. They don't scream. They adapt. They learn quickly and often unconsciously that visibility is conditional. That to be noticed, you must be useful. That to be included, you must be agreeable. That to be loved, you must cause no friction. And so the child becomes a chameleon, not because they are manipulative, but because they are desperate. Desperate to feel real in a world that has yet to confirm their existence. This adaptation is brilliantly tragic, because the child doesn't stop wanting love, they just start earning it. They become the emotional caretaker, the achiever, the entertainer, the one who makes everyone else feel better. They learn to become exactly what each person needs, moment by moment, interaction by interaction. It's a performance so seamless, so automatic, that even they don't realize it's a performance anymore. It just becomes who they are, who they think they are. But here's the philosophical twist. When you become everything, you become nothing. Because if your identity shifts based on the room you walk into, then where is the anchor? Where is the self? The chameleon child grows into an adult who can connect easily, make everyone comfortable, and still feel completely unknown. Why? Because no one ever meets the real them. Not because others are cruel, but because the real them never shows up. It was buried long ago, hidden under layers of adaptation. This is the essence of the chameleon's curse. You become so good at blending in, you forget how to stand. You forget how to hold your shape when others disapprove. You forget how to speak your truth when it might cause discomfort. And over time, you begin to fear your own authenticity. You associate being real with being alone. Because somewhere deep in your earliest memories, you were real and no one responded. That memory gets encoded as a belief. If I am truly myself, I will be ignored. So you trade authenticity for attachment, and the world rewards you for it. Think about how many adults live this way, over-functioning in every relationship, apologizing for taking up space, smiling when they want to cry, saying yes when their body screams no. It becomes a lifestyle, a survival system. And the tragedy is that it works. It gets them approval, admiration, even success, but not connection. Because connection requires presence, and presence requires you, not your mask, not your performance, you. So ask yourself, when was the last time someone truly saw you and you let them? Most people don't even know what that feels like. They've lived their entire lives being seen as roles. The smart one, the strong one, the reliable one, the funny one. But roles are relational. They only exist in context. And when you strip them away, what's left? That's the terrifying question the chameleon never wants to face. Who am I when no one needs anything from me? This is why healing from invisibility isn't just about being noticed, it's about unlearning the performance. It's about recognizing that your worth isn't tied to your usefulness, that your presence is not a problem that needs to be justified, that the real you, the one with needs, with flaws, with edges, is not too much or not enough. It's human, and that's enough. But here's the challenge. When you've lived as a chameleon for so long, standing still feels dangerous. Holding your shape feels selfish. Saying no feels like betrayal. And so healing becomes a process of relearning safety. Safety in being disliked. Safety in disappointing others. Safety in being misunderstood. Because only when you can survive that discomfort can you begin to show up as your full self. And that's where the real freedom lies. Not in being seen perfectly, but in being seen truly. In letting the world meet you, not a version of you customized for their comfort, but the you that existed before the world trained you to disappear. In the next part, we'll dive into the emotional and existential cost of this invisibility, the silent grief, the chronic loneliness, and the deep yearning for validation that can follow the unseen child into every chapter of adulthood. Echoes in the void. The adult longing for recognition that never comes. There's a kind of pain that doesn't scream. It doesn't even speak. It just lingers in the pauses between conversations, in the way your eyes scan a room for a face that never turns, in the way you smile a little too quickly when you feel overlooked. This is the pain of the unseen child grown into an adult. A person who has learned how to navigate life with grace, competence, even charisma, but who carries, deep beneath all of it, a wound that never fully closed. It's the wound of being unmet. Not unloved, not abandoned in the dramatic sense, but never fully recognized. And that wound doesn't vanish with age. It echoes, quietly, relentlessly. This echo shows up in the most subtle ways. In the need to be perfect before you share your work. In the ache that follows praise because you suspect they still don't really see you. In the relationships where you give everything, hoping, praying that this time, someone will finally offer you back what you never received. Full, unconditional recognition. But it never quite lands, does it? Because even when you're loved, there's a part of you that doesn't believe it. Not fully. Because how can you receive love when your core self has never been validated? Recognition is not attention. It's not applause. It's not even love in the conventional sense. Recognition is witnessing someone looking at you and saying, I see you, not just what you do for me, not just who you pretend to be. Joe. And when that doesn't happen in childhood, we go searching for it everywhere else. In jobs, in partners, in friends, in followers. But no matter how much we achieve, no matter how much we're admired, the echo remains. Because the child within us is still waiting for that one moment when someone looks past the performance and says, you don't have to earn this. Your existence is enough. And here's the unbearable irony. We often seek this recognition from the very types of people who cannot give it. We're drawn to emotionally distant partners, to unavailable friendships, to mentors who replicate the early environment of absence. Why? Because the wound wants to resolve itself. It wants to go back to the original source of pain and rewrite the story. But the past doesn't change. And so we re-injure ourselves again and again, confusing familiarity with destiny. This is why so many people feel chronically lonely, even in relationships. They're surrounded by people, yet starving for connection. They laugh at parties, respond to texts, show up for everyone and still feel like they don't exist. Because what they long for isn't company, it's contact. Soul-to-soul contact. The kind that says, you don't have to disappear here, But to receive that kind of recognition, you first have to risk being seen. Not the curated version of you, the real one. The one you've kept hidden for decades because somewhere deep down, you believe that if people saw that version, they'd walk away. This is the paradox. We crave to be seen, and yet we fear it more than anything, because visibility is vulnerability. And vulnerability is dangerous when your earliest experiences taught you that your truth was too much, too complicated, or simply irrelevant. So how do we begin to break the cycle? First, we must grieve, not rush to fix, not chase another source of validation, but grieve what we never got. The birthday that no one celebrated, the feelings that no one acknowledged, the words we needed to hear but never came. This grief is sacred. It's not weakness. It's the doorway to healing. Because only when we mourn what we lacked can we stop unconsciously chasing it in places it can't be found. And second, we must begin to recognize ourselves. This sounds cliché, but it's revolutionary. Because for the unseen child, self-recognition feels foreign, almost illegal. To look in the mirror and say, "I see you, I hear you, I believe you," is not a self-help affirmation. It's a radical act of reclamation. You become the witness you always needed. You become the one who doesn't turn away. So let me ask you, what part of you have you never allowed to be seen? And what would happen if you finally let it speak? In the final part, we'll explore the transformation, what happens when the unseen child begins to step into presence, to rebuild identity on truth instead of performance, and to finally live as someone who is no longer searching for the eyes of others to feel real. Becoming visible, how the unseen child finds their way back to themselves. There comes a moment, not loud or dramatic, often not even noticed by others, when something shifts inside you. After yourself into shapes that fit other people's expectations, after decades of trying to earn the love and recognition you were silently denied, you begin to ask a different question. Not how can I make them see me, but why do I need them to? That moment, quiet as it may be, is the beginning of visibility. Not the kind that puts you on a stage, but the kind that roots you in your own presence. That's when the unseen child starts to come home. Becoming visible is not about making noise. It's about making contact with yourself. It's about remembering the parts of you that you abandoned in order to be acceptable. The anger you swallowed, the joy you muted, the desires you minimized, all of it. It begins with the terrifying, beautiful act of telling the truth to yourself. I was ignored. I was hurt. I mattered. And no one showed me that. That truth isn't petty. It isn't victimhood. It's freedom. Because when you stop gaslighting your younger self, when you stop pretending it wasn't that bad, you create space for something new. Integration. And integration is where healing begins. You no longer split yourself into the acceptable and the exiled. You bring the whole self into the light. You stop performing emotions you don't feel. You stop saying yes when you mean no. You stop apologizing for wanting more. And for the first time, you begin to feel what it's like to exist on your own terms, not as a reaction to others, but as a declaration of being. You stand in rooms and don't shrink. You speak and don't scan the room for approval. You rest not because you've earned it, but because you're allowed to. But let's be honest, this journey isn't smooth. When you start to show up as your full self, the world doesn't always celebrate. Some people will pull away. Some will accuse you of changing. Some will try to guilt you back into your old roles. That's part of the process. Because the systems that benefited from your invisibility will resist your visibility. You were easier to deal with when you were compliant, agreeable, quiet. Now you take up space. Now your boundaries are clear, and that disrupts the equilibrium. But don't let that scare you. Let it affirm you. because disruption is a sign of growth. And here's the most profound truth. The more you see yourself, the less you need others to. That doesn't mean you don't want connection, it means you're no longer starving for it. You're no longer waiting for someone else's gaze to confirm your existence. You've become your own witness. You've become the safe space you never had. And from that place, connection becomes real. It's no longer a transaction or a performance. It's a meeting of whole people, not fragments of survival. So now, I ask you, are you willing to meet the version of yourself you've never allowed to emerge? The version that doesn't perform, doesn't please, doesn't hide. What would it feel like to live as someone who no longer negotiates their presence? Because that's what's possible. To stand in front of the mirror and not flinch. To walk into a room and not shrink. To speak and not apologize. To rest and not justify. To be without needing to be earned, explained, or approved. That's the gift you give yourself when you heal the wound of being ignored. You stop waiting for the world to see you. You see yourself. And at last, that is enough.